You crack open a beer on a Friday evening, the pressure of the week dissolves somewhere between the hiss of the cap and the first sip. You don't think about what you're doing, you don't think about why, it just feels right. It feels almost ancient. It is ancient, what you just did. That small, unremarkable ritual is something your ancestors have been doing for longer than civilization has existed. Longer than writing, longer than the wheel, longer than any story you were ever told in a classroom. The urge you feel on a Friday evening is not a modern habit, it is a biological inheritance. And once you understand where it actually comes from, you will never look at that bottle the same way again. Here's where most people get the timeline completely wrong. The standard story goes something like this. Humans discovered farming around 10,000 years ago. Grain started fermenting by accident. Someone drank it, someone liked it, and beer was born. Clean, simple, logical, and almost entirely incomplete, because alcohol was not waiting for us to invent agriculture. Alcohol was already in the world, and we were already drinking it. Go back 10 million years, not to humans, to our ancestors. Ape-like creatures moving through the forests of East Africa, doing what primates do, eating fruit, and some of that fruit, ripe and falling from trees, fermenting in the heat of the African sun, contained ethanol. Small amounts, maybe 1 or 2%, but enough for a body to taste the difference, enough for a brain to register something. And here's the part that changes everything. At some point, roughly 10 million years ago, a genetic mutation occurred in our ancestral lineage. A single change to the gene that produces an enzyme called ADH4. This enzyme processes ethanol in the stomach before it even reaches the bloodstream. The mutated version was 40 times more efficient at breaking down alcohol than anything that came before it. 40 times, this was not an accident. This was selection. The primates who could process fermenting fruit without getting dangerously intoxicated had access to a food source their competitors could not safely eat. They got more calories. They survived more winters. They passed on that enzyme to their children and to their children's children. And eventually, in a very long, unbroken chain to you. You did not develop a tolerance for alcohol, you inherited one. It has been inside your body for 10 million years waiting for Friday evenings, but that is only half the story. And honestly, what comes next is even stranger. Fast forward to roughly 9,000 years ago, China. The site of Jiahu archaeologists digging through ancient pottery find residue. Chemical analysis reveals a mixture of fermented rice, honey, and fruit. This is the oldest confirmed alcoholic beverage ever discovered. 9,000 years old, older than the Egyptian pyramids, older than Stonehenge, older than any written language. But the people who made it were not celebrating the harvest. They were not partying. The evidence suggests this drink was ceremonial, ritualistic. It was made for the dead. The first thing humans ever deliberately brewed was an offering to the afterlife. Sit with that for a moment. The impulse was not pleasure. It was not escape. The first brewers were trying to communicate with something beyond themselves. Alcohol was not a social lubricant. It was a door, a way to thin the membrane between the living world and whatever they believed existed beyond it. Across cultures, across continents, this pattern repeats. The Sumerians brewed beer for temple offerings, the Egyptians placed it in tombs, the Greeks used wine in their mystery cults, the Vikings brought it into battle believing it connected them to Odin. Every civilization that discovered fermentation independently made the same instinctive leap. This substance is not just for pleasure, it is for the sacred. And here is where it gets uncomfortable, because that instinct did not disappear. It just got repackaged. You're not drinking to get drunk, or at least that is not all you're doing. Every time humans gather and drink, something else is happening underneath it. Barriers lower. Strangers become allies. Grief gets spoken out loud. Love confessions that could never survive sobriety suddenly exist in the air between two people. The social bonding that alcohol facilitates is not a side effect. Research now suggests it is a primary driver of why the habit survived. Groups that could drink together could trust each other faster, could coordinate, could mourn together, could celebrate together. The village that shared a cup was harder to break apart than the village that did not. Your impulse to open a bottle with other people is 10,000 years of social engineering. Your body is running a program so old it predates your language, predates your name, predates the concept of a week, and therefore the concept of a Friday. But here's where the nightmare begins, because the same mutation that made us uniquely capable of processing alcohol also made us uniquely capable of craving it. The same evolutionary advantage that let our ancestors eat fermenting fruit became, under different conditions, a trap. Alcohol affects the dopamine system, the reward system, the part of the brain that decides what is worth doing again. In a world where alcohol was rare, seasonal, tied to ripe fruit and religious ceremony, this was manageable. In a world where alcohol is available at every hour of every day, in quantities that would have been unimaginable to any ancestor, the ancient programming runs into a wall it was never built to handle. The enzyme says yes, the brain says more. The evolutionary logic that once kept our lineage alive starts pulling in the wrong direction. You did not build this, you inherited it. The same gene that gave you a biological head start 10 million years ago is the same gene working inside every person who has ever stared at a bottle and wondered why stopping is so hard. This is not a moral failure. This is deep time catching up with the modern world, and that changes the question entirely. The question was never, when did humans start drinking? The real question is whether we have ever fully understood what we were doing when we did. The ritual predates the reason. The ceremony predates the civilization. The thirst predates the glass. You crack open a beer on a Friday evening. You don't think about what you're doing. You just feel something settle, something ease, some ancient part of you recognizing something it has always known, a door slightly open, the same one they opened at Jiahu, the same one they cracked at every altar, every grave, every fire lit against the dark of 10,000 winters before yours. You were never just drinking. You were reaching for the same thing they were. You still don't know what it is.